Christmas morning, a pregnant woman falls 5 stories from her luxury balcony, straight onto a black Mercedes parked below. But here's the twist. The car belongs to her billionaire ex-boyfriend. Coincidence? Or fate stepping in to save her life? What looked like a tragic accident soon unravels into a nightmare of lies, betrayal, and a fight for justice that would shock the entire country. Was it really an accident or something far darker? Stay with me, because the truth behind this Christmas fall will leave you speechless. If stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and share this video to help more people discover it. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next unbelievable true drama. Now let's begin. The Christmas lights blurred into streaks of red and green as Claire Martinez fell 5 stories through the cold Denver air. 7 months pregnant, 32 years old. And in that moment, as the ground rushed up to meet her, one thought crystallized in her mind. She should have left him years ago. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This story doesn't begin with the fall. It begins 24 hours earlier on Christmas Eve, when 3 people made decisions that would collide in the most impossible way. 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Claire stood in the living room of the penthouse she shared with her husband Marcus, wrapping the last present under their tree. The lights twinkled exactly the way she'd imagined when she first moved into this luxury apartment 5 years ago. Back when she still believed in fairy tales. Back when she thought Marcus Reed was her prince. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Working late, don't wait up." Claire's hand went to her swollen belly. 7 months along with their daughter, their first child. She thought maybe the baby would change things, soften him, bring back the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. She was wrong. Claire set down the present and picked up the mail she'd been avoiding all day. Credit card statements? She'd been too tired to open them earlier, but something made her look now. Hotel Monaco, December 15th, $247. December 18th, $312. December 21st, $298. Her hands started shaking. Marcus didn't travel for work. His real estate development office was 15 minutes from their building. Across town, in an empty tech company office, Ethan Cross sat at his desk staring at a small wrapped package. The building was silent. Everyone had gone home to their families hours ago, but Ethan stayed the way he always stayed. Work was easier than going home to an empty penthouse, easier than admitting he'd let the love of his life slip away 8 years ago. The package contained a first edition copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, Claire's favorite book. He'd searched for months to find this edition, the one with the original illustrations. He'd wrapped it 3 weeks ago, and for 3 weeks it had sat in his desk drawer while he debated whether sending it was pathetic or romantic. She's married, he told himself for the 1,000th time. She has a husband. She's pregnant. Let her go. But he couldn't, because Ethan Cross had made the biggest mistake of his life when he chose his company over Claire Martinez. When he worked 90-hour weeks and forgot anniversaries and canceled dates. When he was so focused on building his empire that he didn't notice her slipping away. By the time he looked up, she was gone, married to someone else. And Ethan learned too late that all the money in the world couldn't buy back lost time. He picked up the package, made a decision. He'd drive to her building, leave the gift at the front desk. Anonymous, just so she'd know someone was thinking of her on Christmas. It was a stupid plan, but loneliness makes people do stupid things. Meanwhile, at the Hotel Monaco, room 847, Marcus Reed lay in bed next to Sienna Bradford. She was 28, beautiful, and everything Claire used to be before pregnancy and marriage dulled her shine. Sienna was an interior designer he'd hired to decorate the nursery. That's how it always started, wasn't it? An innocent work relationship that slowly became something more. "You said we'd be together by spring," Sienna said, scrolling through her phone. "When are you leaving her?" Marcus pulled her closer. "After the baby, then I have grounds for custody, then divorce was. Your mom's texting me, asking when I'm coming home tomorrow. Tell her you'll be late. I need you here." Sienna sighed but didn't argue. She never did. That's what Marcus loved about her, unlike Claire, who'd become so demanding lately. Always wanting to know where he was. Always questioning him, always looking at him with those suspicious eyes. His laptop sat open on the desk. He'd been researching earlier, before Sienna arrived. Google searches still visible on the screen. Life insurance policy pregnant wife. Balcony fall survival rate. Can you get convicted without witnesses? Marcus had been planning this for months, ever since Claire found out she was pregnant, ever since she became an anchor around his neck instead of an asset. His mother Barbara had been clear. Divorce would cost him millions. The prenup protected some assets, but Claire could still take half of everything he'd built. But a tragic accident, a grieving widower, that was different. That came with life insurance money, sympathy, and freedom. He just needed the right moment, the right opportunity. Christmas morning would be perfect. Claire couldn't sleep. The hotel charges haunted her. She'd made a decision. Tomorrow, on Christmas Day, she'd confront Marcus. She'd ask him directly about the affair she knew in her bones was happening. She'd saved $12,000 in a secret bank account over 2 years. Grocery money, gas money, little bits here and there that Marcus never noticed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her started if she needed to leave. If he admitted to the affair, she'd take their daughter and go. She'd already researched women's shelters, talked to a lawyer confidentially. She had a plan. What Claire didn't know was that Marcus had a plan too. And his plan didn't include her surviving to see their daughter born. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. Claire woke at 7 to find Marcus's side of the bed empty. Again. She pulled herself up, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward, and walked to the kitchen. That's when she saw him, sitting at the counter, staring at his phone, his jaw tight. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. He didn't look up. "We need to talk about money." Claire's heart sank, not even a greeting, not even acknowledgement of the holiday. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Okay, let's talk." Marcus turned his phone toward her. On the screen was her bank account. The secret one, $12,000. He'd found it. "Planning to leave me?" His voice was ice cold. "Stealing from me?" "It's not stealing. I saved that from everything you have is mine." He stood up, and Claire took an involuntary step back. She'd seen him angry before, but this was different. This was dangerous. "This house, that car, the baby inside you, all mine." "Marcus, please, can we just—" He grabbed her phone off the counter, started scrolling through her messages, found texts to her old friend Jenny, messages about feeling trapped, about not knowing how much longer she could do this. "You're trying to ruin me," Marcus said, his voice getting louder. "After everything I've given you. After I rescued you from that boring life with a boring ex-boyfriend. This is how you repay me?" Claire's mind raced. She needed to de-escalate. She knew the signs, the clenched fists, the red face, the way he was backing her toward the balcony door. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," she said, hands up, palms out. "I just wanted some security for the baby, for us." "For us?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean for you, so you could leave, take my daughter, take my money, make me look like a fool." He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the balcony. The door was already open. Had he opened it earlier? Was this planned? "Marcus, stop! You're hurting me." "You want out?" He shoved her against the railing. The metal was cold against her back. 5 stories up. The street below looked so far away. "Then get out. Please." Claire's hands went to her belly. "The baby. Think about the baby." "That's all I think about." Marcus's hands were on her shoulders now. "How she's trapped me. How you trapped me. How I'm stuck in this life I never wanted." Claire grabbed his shirt, tried to pull herself away from the edge. But Marcus was stronger and angrier. And in that moment, she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than the 5-story drop behind her. He'd already decided. This wasn't a fight that got out of hand. This was murder. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Please, Marcus, I love you." For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, hesitation. But then his jaw set. His hands pressed harder against her chest. And he pushed. Claire fell backward over the railing. The world spun. Her scream echoed off the buildings. Christmas lights from the street below blurred into streaks of color. Red, green, Gold. She thought about her daughter, about the life her baby would never have, about how she'd failed to protect her. The ground rushed up. Claire's last thought was a simple one. I should have left him years ago. But then something impossible happened. Instead of hitting pavement, Claire crashed onto the windshield of a black Mercedes S-Class parked across the street. The laminated safety glass spiderwebbed but held. The car alarm screamed. Claire's broken body lay sprawled across the hood, blood spreading across the shattered glass like branches of a terrible tree. Inside the car, Ethan Cross had been lost in thought. He'd parked there 25 minutes ago with Claire's Christmas present in his lap, debating. Should he leave it at the desk? Was he being pathetic? Should he just drive away and finally let her go? He'd been about to start the engine when the world exploded. The crash, the alarm, the screaming. Ethan stumbled out of his car, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. A woman on his windshield, pregnant, blood everywhere. And then he saw her face. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, 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 no. Claire? He ran to her side. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Blood trickled from her mouth. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Her hands were still on her belly, trying even now to protect her baby. Claire, stay with me. Stay awake. Look at me. Ethan pulled out his phone with shaking hands. This is Ethan Cross. I'm at 5th in Larimer. A woman fell. She's pregnant. She's on my car. Please, send everyone. Send everyone now. He barely recognized his own voice. 8 years. 8 years since he'd last seen her face. Since she'd left him. Since he'd let her go. And now she was dying on his windshield on Christmas morning. Above them, Marcus Reed appeared at the balcony railing. For a split second, his face showed shock. He hadn't expected a witness, hadn't expected the car. But then his expression smoothed into something practiced, something false. He ran. By the time Marcus made it downstairs, still in his bathrobe, emergency vehicles were arriving. He burst through the building's front door, screaming, "My wife! Oh my God, Claire!" And the performance was perfect. Devastated husband, tragic accident. He fell to his knees beside Ethan, reaching for Claire, but Ethan blocked him. Some instinct, some protective reflex made Ethan put his body between Marcus and Claire. "Don't touch her," Ethan said. Marcus looked at him for the first time. Really looked. Recognition dawned. You're the ex-boyfriend. What are you doing here?" Before Ethan could answer, paramedics swarmed them. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking Claire's pulse, stabilizing her neck, cutting away her sweater to assess injuries. One of them put a fetal monitor on her belly. The baby's heartbeat, fast and erratic, filled the air. A detective arrived, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and an air of having seen everything. Detective Sarah Bennett. She looked at the scene, looked at Claire, looked at the two men, one covered in blood, one in a bathrobe. Two men who clearly knew each other. And the woman they both loved dying between them. "Sir," Detective Bennett said to Marcus, "what happened?" "She was decorating the balcony. She must have slipped. The pregnancy makes her unsteady." "Oh God, is she going to be okay?" Bennett turned to Ethan. "And you?" "I saw her fall from up there." Ethan pointed to the 5th floor balcony. "I was in my car. She came off that balcony." "You witnessed the fall?" "Yes." "Did you see how she fell?" Ethan hesitated. He'd been looking down at the present in his lap. He'd heard the scream, looked up just in time to see her body falling. But the exact moment she went over the railing, he'd missed it. "I saw her falling," Ethan said carefully. "I didn't see the moment she went over." Marcus's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. Bennett noticed. She noticed everything. The paramedics loaded Claire onto a stretcher. "We need to move now. The baby's in distress. This is a level 1 trauma." As they loaded Claire into the ambulance, Ethan caught her hand. For just a second, her eyes focused, found his face. And he could have sworn he saw recognition. Relief. Hope. Then she was gone. Sirens screaming, racing toward the hospital. Ethan stood in the street, covered in her blood, staring at his shattered windshield. The Christmas present had fallen out when he jumped from the car. It lay on the pavement, torn wrapping paper revealing the cover of the book inside. The Prophet. He picked it up with shaking hands. Detective Bennett was still watching him, watching Marcus, taking mental notes about body language, about the story she was being told versus the story she was reading in these two men's faces. "Both of you need to come to the hospital," she said. "I'll have more questions." Marcus nodded, went back inside to change. Ethan just stood there, holding the book, staring at the blood on his hands. "Mr. Cross," Bennett said quietly, "you should know. I've been a detective for 23 years. I've seen a lot of falls. And in my experience, pregnant women don't slip off balconies while decorating on Christmas morning." Ethan met her eyes. He pushed her. "Did you see him push her?" "No, but I know he did." Bennett nodded slowly. "Knowing and proving are two different things. Get to the hospital. She's going to need you." As Ethan drove to the hospital behind the ambulance, one thought kept circling in his mind. 8 years ago, he'd let Claire walk away. He'd been too focused on work, too absent, too late to fight for her pardon. He wasn't going to be too late again. The emergency room at Denver General was chaos. Ethan had been in the waiting room for 48 hours straight. No sleep, barely any food, just coffee and terror and waiting. They'd taken Claire straight to surgery, emergency C-section. The baby was in distress. They couldn't wait, Dr. Patricia Walsh, a trauma surgeon in her 50s with steel gray hair and calm eyes, had given him updates when she could. Claire had survived the initial surgery, barely. Grade 3 liver laceration, shattered pelvis, fractured vertebrae at L2 through L4, internal bleeding they'd had to fight to control. The baby had been delivered. 3 pounds, 2 ounces, 29 weeks gestation. A girl, Sophia. Marcus had named her Sophia. The baby was in the NICU, in an incubator, fighting for every breath. But Dr. Walsh said her prognosis was good. 95% survival rate at this stage with their level of care. Claire had been placed in a medically induced coma to let her body heal, to let the swelling in her brain go down, to give her a chance. Ethan had called his assistant, canceled everything, told his board he'd be unavailable indefinitely. He wasn't leaving. Not until Claire woke up. Not until he knew she'd be okay. On the afternoon of the second day, the elevator doors opened, and Marcus Reed stepped out. But he wasn't alone. With him was Barbara Reed, his mother. 60 years old, dripping with old Denver money, pearl necklace, designer coat, hair styled perfectly despite the crisis. Behind her came 2 more people, a man in an expensive suit who screamed high-powered attorney, and a woman with a tablet who looked like she ran crisis management for a living. "Which room?" Marcus demanded of the nurse at the station. The nurse checked her computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Reed is in the IE, only immediate family, and only 1 visitor at a time." "I'm her husband." "I understand, sir, but—" Ethan stepped out from the waiting room. "He's not going in there." Marcus spun around, saw Ethan, his expression hardened. "You have no right to be here." "I have every right. I'm the one who's been here, making sure she's okay." "You're her ex-boyfriend from 8 years ago." The lawyer stepped forward, 50-ish, silver hair slicked back. "Richard Westbrook, Mr. Reed's attorney. You have no legal standing. My client is the husband, the father of her child, and you need to leave before we have security remove you." Barbara Reed stepped forward, placing a manicured hand on Ethan's arm. "Mr. Cross, I appreciate your concern. Truly. But this is a family matter. Claire is my son's wife. That's their daughter in the NICU. You're intruding on a very private tragedy." "Tragedy?" Ethan shook off her hand. He pushed her off a balcony. The hallway went silent. The lawyer's eyes sharpened. The woman with the tablet started typing, and Marcus's face showed perfect, practiced shock. "How dare you?" Barbara said, her voice cold. "My son loved Claire. Loves her still. This was a terrible accident. I know what I saw." "You saw a fall," Westbrook said smoothly, "from across the street, from inside your vehicle. Hardly a reliable witness to what happened on that balcony." "He's trying to deflect." Marcus's voice was shaking. Perfect emotion. Perfect devastation. He never got over her leaving him, and now he's using this tragedy to insinuate terrible things about me. Detective Bennett appeared from down the hallway. She'd been there too. interviewing staff, waiting for Claire to wake up, gathering evidence. "Gentlemen," she said, "this is a hospital. Let's keep our voices down." "Detective," Westbrook turned to her, "hope you're not taking this man's wild accusations seriously. My client came home from a business meeting to find his wife had fallen while decorating their balcony. He's devastated, and now he's being harassed by her former boyfriend." Bennett's expression gave nothing away. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to need you to come down to the station, answer some questions. Am I under arrest? Should you be?" The lawyer stepped between them. "My client will cooperate fully, but we'll need to schedule something appropriate after the holiday, after his wife is stable." "His wife is in a coma," Ethan said. "His daughter is fighting for her life in the NICU, and he shows up 48 hours later with a lawyer and a PR team." The woman with the tablet looked up. "Jennifer Hampton, crisis management. And you are?" "Someone who actually cares about Claire. A stalker ex-boyfriend who happened to be parked outside her building on Christmas morning." Hampton's smile was sharp. "That's an interesting coincidence, Mr. Cross." Ethan felt the trap closing. They were twisting everything, making him look obsessed, making Marcus look like a grieving husband. And he had no proof, no evidence. Just instinct, just the certainty that Marcus Reed had tried to murder his wife. Detective Bennett looked between them. "Mr. Reed, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder." The hallway erupted. Barbara gasped. Westbrook immediately started objecting. Marcus's face went from shock to angry in seconds. "This is insane. She fell. My mother was there. She'll tell you." "Your mother," Bennett said calmly, "will be giving a statement. But based on the victim's injuries, the trajectory of the fall, and witness statements, I have probable cause." "Turn around, Mr. Reed." "Don't say a word," Westbrook hissed to Marcus as Bennett cuffed him. "Not one word." As they led Marcus away, he locked eyes with Ethan, and for just a second, the mask dropped. Ethan saw cold calculation. Saw a man who had already planned his next move. "I'll be out by tomorrow," Marcus said quietly, "and you'll regret this." After they were gone, Barbara Reed turned to Ethan. Her eyes were hard. "You've made a terrible mistake, Mr. Cross. My son is innocent, and by the time we're through, everyone will know that." She left with Hampton following, already making calls, already spinning the narrative. Ethan sank into a chair in the waiting room. His hands were shaking. He'd been running on adrenaline and coffee for 2 days. Now that the confrontation was over, exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. "Mr. Cross," Dr. Walsh stood in the doorway. "Mrs. Reed is stable. We're going to try reducing sedation tomorrow. See if she wakes up. You should go home. Get some rest." "I can't. What if she wakes up? What if she needs you healthy and rested, not collapsed in my waiting room." Walsh's voice was kind but firm. "Go home, shower, sleep. Come back tomorrow. I'll call you if anything changes." Ethan wanted to argue, but his body was shutting down. He needed food, sleep, a shower. "You'll call me?" "The second anything changes, I promise." He stood, grabbed his jacket, started for the elevator, then stopped. "Doctor, when she wakes up, she's going to be scared, confused. Can you tell her that I'm here, that she's not alone?" Walsh studied him. "How long were you two together?" 3 years. 8 years ago, I let her go. Biggest mistake of my life. And now? Now I'm not letting go again." Walsh nodded. "I'll tell her." Ethan went home, showered, fell into bed, and dreamed of Christmas lights and falling in blood on shattered glass. When his phone rang at 5 in the morning, he answered before the first ring finished. "She's awake," Dr. Walsh said, "and she's asking for you." Claire opened her eyes to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of machines. Everything hurt, a dull, crushing ache that covered her entire body. She tried to move and pain exploded through her pelvis. A moan escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Mrs. Reed." A nurse appeared above her, young, dark hair, kind eyes. "Don't try to move. You've been in an accident. You're in the hospital." Accident. The word didn't fit. Claire's mind was foggy, thoughts moving like they were underwater. But she remembered. Marcus's hands on her chest, the push, the fall, the lights blurring as she dropped. And then nothing. Her hands went to her timidly. Flat, empty, panic seized her chest. "My baby," she whispered. Her voice came out raspy, her throat raw. Where's my baby? Your daughter is in the NICU. She's stable. You're both fighters, Mrs. Reed. Daughter, she had a daughter. Claire started crying, relief and fear mixing together. Can I see her? Soon. Let's make sure you're stable first. The door opened. A woman in her late 40s entered, showing a badge. Mrs. Reed, I'm Detective Sarah Bennett. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Dr. Walsh entered behind the detective. She just woke up. Can this wait? The sooner we talk, the better our case. Bennett pulled a chair close to the bed. Mrs. Reed, do you remember Christmas morning? Claire closed her eyes, saw Marcus's face, his rage, his hands pushing her. Yes. Can you tell me what happened? The words stuck in her throat. For 5 years, she'd made excuses. Covered bruises with makeup. Lied to friends about where the injuries came from. Told herself it wasn't that bad, that he loved her, that she was overreacting. But he'd tried to kill her, kill their baby, and suddenly all those years of silence felt like a betrayal. Not of Marcus, of herself. My husband pushed me off our balcony. The words hung in the air, the first truth Claire had spoken about Marcus Reed in 5 years. And saying it out loud felt like breaking through water after drowning, like breathing for the first time. Why would he do that? Bennett's voice was gentle. No judgment, just focus. Because I found out about his mistress. Because I had money saved to leave him. Because he was angry. Because he's been hurting me for years and I never told anyone. The words came faster now, a dam breaking. He controlled everything, every dollar, every friend, where I went, who I talked to. He checked my phone, my emails. He isolated me. And when I got pregnant, I thought maybe he'd change. But he got worse. And on Christmas Eve, I found hotel charges. I knew he was cheating, and I confronted him, and he pushed me. Bennett was writing everything down. Did anyone else see this happen? His mother was supposed to be coming over, but I don't know if she was there yet. I was on the balcony with Marcus, just us. Where's your evidence, the hotel charges? Saved messages? Claire's heart sank. On my laptop, in our apartment. We searched your apartment. There's no laptop. Your husband claims you never had one. He took it. He knew I had evidence. He knew. The detective's expression was sympathetic but serious. Without that evidence, without witnesses, this becomes he said, she said. Your husband is claiming this was an accident, that you fell while decorating. I didn't fall. He pushed me. I believe you, Mrs. Reed, but belief doesn't get convictions. Evidence does. Before Claire could respond, the door burst open. Barbara Reed swept in like a winter storm. Expensive coat, designer handbag, perfectly styled silver hair despite the crisis. Claire, oh my God, my poor girl. Barbara rushed to the bedside, pushing past Detective Bennett. She grabbed Claire's hand, squeezing hard. Too hard. What happened? Derek is beside himself, absolutely destroyed. Ma'am, Bennett stood. This is an active investigation. I need you to step outside. Barbara ignored her. She leaned close to Claire, her perfume overwhelming. Lavender. She always wore lavender. Derek said you were decorating, that you wanted more lights on the balcony. He told you to wait, that it was dangerous, but you insisted. The pregnancy hormones have made you so emotional lately, so impulsive. Claire tried to pull her hand away, but Barbara's grip tightened. Her nails dug into Claire's skin. Ma'am, Bennett's voice got harder. I need you to leave now. My son would never hurt anyone. Barbara's voice carried across the room, making sure everyone heard, making sure the narrative was set. Never. Claire is confused. The fall, the trauma. She doesn't know what she's saying. Ma'am, security will remove you if necessary. Barbara finally released Claire's hand, smoothed her coat. Of course, I'm just worried. You understand. She leaned down, kissed Claire's forehead, whispered so only Claire could hear. Be careful what you say, dear. Lies have consequences. Think of your daughter. Then she left, and the room felt 10 degrees warmer. Bennett returned to Claire's bedside. Are you okay? Claire was shaking. She's going to protect him. She always does. His whole family. They have money, connections. They'll bury me. Let me worry about that. Right now, I need you to tell me every detail about your relationship with Marcus Reed, every incident of abuse, every threat, every bruise. We're going to build a case, and we're going to make sure he answers for what he did. For the next hour, Claire told Detective Bennett everything. The first time Marcus had grabbed her too hard during an argument, the first time he'd pushed her against a wall, the escalation over 5 years, the names he called her, the ways he controlled her money, her friendships, her entire life. The time he'd shaken her so hard her head snapped back. The time he'd thrown a glass that shattered inches from her face. All the things she'd told herself weren't that bad, weren't abuse, weren't worth leaving over. All the times she'd made excuses for him. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. But she also felt lighter, clearer, like she'd been carrying this weight for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. One more question, Bennett said. You mentioned someone was with you when you fell, that you landed on a car? I don't remember landing, just falling. The car belonged to Ethan Cross, your ex-boyfriend. He's been here for 3 days, hasn't left the hospital. Claire's breath caught. Ethan's here? He saved your life. If you'd hit the pavement instead of his car, you and your daughter would be dead. The laminated windshield caught you, distributed the impact, gave you a chance. I need to see him. He's in the waiting room. But first, you need to see your daughter. And you need to rest. You've been through hell, Mrs. Reed. Claire, just call me Claire. I don't want his name anymore. Bennett nodded. Claire, you did the right thing. Speaking up, telling the truth. A lot of women can't do that. Don't do that. They stay silent out of fear or shame or love. But you found your voice. That takes courage. After Bennett left, Dr. Walsh came back. Ready to meet your daughter? They wheeled Claire to the NICU in her hospital bed. Every bump sent pain through her broken body, but she didn't care. She needed to see her baby, needed to know she was real. The NICU was quiet, soft lights, hushed voices, tiny babies in incubators fighting for life. A nurse led them to an isolette in the corner, and there she was, Sophia Reed, 3 pounds, 2 ounces, 29 weeks, tiny and perfect and breathing on her own, dark hair like Claire's, fighting like her mother. Can I touch her? Claire whispered. You can hold her. Skin-to-skin contact is important. The nurse carefully lifted Sophia, wires and all, and placed her on Claire's chest. There, meet your mom, little one. The baby was so small, so fragile, but warm, alive. Claire put her hand on Sophia's back, felt her breathing, and started to cry. They'd both survived. Against impossible odds, they were here, together. I'm going to protect you, Claire whispered. I promise. I won't let him hurt you, ever. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Marcus had money, lawyers, his mother's connections. What did Claire have? A hospital bed, injuries that would take months to heal, and her word against his. How was she supposed to protect anyone when she couldn't even protect herself? 3 days later, Claire was watching the news on her hospital room TV when her entire world fell apart. Again. Barbara Reed appeared on Channel 7 News, dressed in elegant black, tears carefully applied. My son Marcus is innocent of these terrible accusations. This is a witch hunt, a misunderstanding, and while I love my daughter-in-law, Claire, dearly, she is a troubled young woman who needs help, not a courtroom. The anchor leaned forward. Mrs. Reed, prosecutors have charged your son with attempted murder. That's a serious accusation. It's a false accusation. Claire has been struggling with severe depression and anxiety throughout her pregnancy. We have documentation, medical records. She threatened suicide multiple times. Claire's hands went cold. Medical records? How did Barbara have her medical records? The screen changed. Documents filled the frame. Claire's own handwriting, therapy notes, prescriptions for Zoloft, a diagnosis of depression and anxiety from 3 years ago, all stamped confidential. This is illegal, Claire breathed. They can't show this. But they were showing it, and worse was coming. We also have text messages, Barberson continued, from Claire's own phone. Messages that show her state of mind in the weeks before this tragedy. The screen filled with text, Claire's words ripped from context and displayed for the world. I feel so trapped. I don't think I can do this. Sometimes everyone would be better off without me. Some days I just want to jump. Claire remembered those texts. She'd sent them to her friend Jenny during her darkest moments. Moments of frustration and depression and feeling overwhelmed. But she'd never meant suicide. She'd meant escaping her marriage, escaping Marcus's control. But without context, they looked damning. They looked like suicide notes. My son tried to save her, Barbara said, her voice breaking perfectly. He tried to pull her back from that balcony, but he couldn't reach her in time. And now he's being accused of the very thing he tried to prevent. It's devastating. Jennifer Hampton appeared on the screen beside Barbara, the crisis management consultant. We believe Claire Reed is suffering from severe postpartum psychosis combined with prenatal depression. She needs psychiatric help, not a criminal trial. And while we sympathize with her pain, we cannot allow false accusations to destroy an innocent man's life. The anchor turned to the camera. Strong words from the Reed family. Marcus Reed is currently out on $2 million bail awaiting trial. His attorney, Richard Westbrook, released a statement saying they look forward to proving his innocence in court. Claire grabbed the remote, changed channels. Every local station was running the story. Denver woman accuses husband of attempted murder. Did she fall or was she pushed? Mental health crisis or domestic violence? Her phone started buzzing. She'd gotten a new one since her old one was in Marcus's possession. The notifications were overwhelming. Social media mentions, news alerts, messages from reporters requesting interviews. She opened Twitter. The hashtag Justice for Marcus was trending. Thousands of tweets, most of them calling her a liar, a gold digger, mentally ill, trying to destroy a good man for money. Women like this are why real abuse victims aren't believed. She jumped and blamed her husband. Disgusting. Depression and lies. That poor man. Claire's hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She'd told the truth. She'd finally found the courage to speak up, and they were destroying her for it. A knock at the door. Ethan entered, and the relief that flooded through Claire was overwhelming. She'd only seen him briefly over the past 3 days. Quick visits, quiet conversations. But knowing he was there, that he'd stayed, that he cared, had been the only thing keeping her sane. "Did you see?" she asked. "I saw." Ethan's face was tight with anger. "It's character assassination. They got your medical records illegally. Those texts were private. This whole thing is working." Claire felt tears starting. "Look at social media. Everyone believes them. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, that I jumped, that I'm lying to frame him." Not everyone. Enough people. "Ethan, what if they're right? What if I am crazy? What if—" "Stop." He pulled a chair close to her bed, took her hand. "You're not crazy. Marcus is an abuser, a manipulator. And now he's doing what abusers do, making you doubt yourself, making everyone doubt you. But I know the truth. Detective Bennett knows the truth. And eventually a jury will know the truth. Will they? Without evidence, without witnesses? It's just my word against his. And his family has money, power, connections." She gestured at the TV. "They're on the news, making me look like a suicidal liar. How am I supposed to fight that?" Before Ethan could answer, her hospital room door opened. A process server entered, looked at Claire, and handed her an envelope. "Claire Reed, you've been served." He left. Claire opened the envelope with shaking hands, read the first page, then read it again because it couldn't possibly say what she thought it said. "He's suing me," she whispered. "Marcus is suing me for defamation." Ethan grabbed the papers, scanned them quickly. "Jesus, he's claiming your accusations have damaged his reputation. His business, he's seeking $10 million in damages." "I don't have $10 million. I don't have anything." "That's the point. He's trying to bury you, scare you, make you recant." Claire lay back against her pillows, stared at the ceiling. "Maybe I should. Maybe if I just say it was an accident, this all goes away. I get my daughter, I get my life back. And he gets away with trying to murder you." "I'm so tired, Ethan. So tired of fighting. So tired of being scared." I know, but giving up isn't the answer. A new knock. Detective Bennett entered, her face grim. I saw the news. I'm sorry, Claire. That was a coordinated attack designed to undermine your credibility before trial. It worked. Not with me, and not with the prosecutor. We're building a case, but I need to warn you. Tomorrow, there's a custody hearing. Marcus is filing for full custody of Sophia. No. The word came out fierce, protective. He can't take her. He's the father. He's out on bail. He has resources, and his lawyers are arguing that you're mentally unstable, that the baby needs to be with her father until the criminal trial resolves. I'm her mother. She needs me. She needs to be with me. I know, and we're going to fight this. But you need to prepare yourself. The judge might grant temporary custody to Marcus, just until trial. Claire looked at Sophia's empty bassinet beside her bed. The baby was back in the NICU for monitoring, but she'd been there earlier, warm and perfect in Claire's arms. Her daughter, her reason for surviving, for fighting. If they take her, Claire said quietly, I don't know if I can survive that. Bennett's expression softened. Then we make sure they don't. I've put in a call to the district attorney. We're going to request an emergency protection order. No contact between Marcus and Sophia until trial. It's a long shot, but it's worth trying. After Bennett left, Ethan stayed, sat in the chair beside Claire's bed, held her hand. And for a while, they just existed in silence. Two people who'd loved each other once, who'd lost each other, who'd found each other again in the worst possible circumstances. Why are you doing this? Claire asked finally. Why are you here? I left you 8 years ago, married someone else. You could have just driven away that morning, left me on your windshield, and called 911 and never looked back. I loved you once, Ethan said simply. Part of me never stopped, and I let you walk away because I was too focused on work, too absent, too late to fight for what mattered. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm broken, Ethan. My pelvis is shattered. My life is destroyed. I have nothing. You have your daughter. You have your truth. You have people who believe you. He squeezed her hand. And you have me, for as long as Val want me. No expectations, no pressure, just support. Claire wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that somehow this nightmare would end, that justice would prevail, that she and Sophia would be okay. But she'd believed in fairy tales before, believed Marcus when he said he loved her, believed things would get better. And look where that had gotten her. 5 stories down, body broken, life shattered, fighting for everything. Maybe believing wasn't enough. Maybe she needed to fight harder, be smarter, find evidence, find witnesses, find something that would make people believe her. Because if she didn't, Marcus would win. He'd take Sophia, he'd walk away free, and eventually, he'd find another woman. Another victim. And Claire couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let that happen. Kate Morrison looked like she'd stepped out of a crime thriller. Former FBI profiler turned private investigator. 46 years old. Sharp eyes. No-nonsense attitude. Ethan had hired her the day after the custody hearing. The hearing had been brutal. Despite Detective Bennett's best efforts, despite the emergency protection order, the judge had granted temporary custody to Marcus Reed. 2 hours of supervised visitation per day for Claire, in the hospital only. The rest of the time, Sophia would be with her father. Claire had screamed when they took her baby, actually screamed, had to be sedated, and Ethan had made a decision. If the legal system wouldn't protect Claire and Sophia, he'd find another way. Enter Kate Morrison. Men like Marcus Reed don't start with attempted murder, Kate said, sitting in Ethan's office 3 days later. They escalate. There's always a pattern, previous victims, previous incidents. We just need to find them. Ethan leaned forward. His mother's been paying off people for years, making problems disappear. How do we find victims who have been paid to stay silent? Public records, sealed divorce files, NDAs leave paper trails if you know where to look. Kate opened her laptop. I've already started digging. Marcus Reed was married twice before Claire. Twice? First wife, Amanda Patterson. Married 14 months, divorced 8 years ago, divorce records sealed, but I have a source in the courthouse. The settlement was $200,000. She signed an NDA. Why would you pay someone $200,000 unless you did something worth hiding? Exactly. Second wife, Jessica Sullivan, married 18 months, divorced 5 years ago, also sealed, also an NDA, $150,000 settlement. Ethan did the math. That's $350,000 in hush money for two failed marriages, both less than 2 years. And both women disappeared after the settlements, changed their names in Amanda's case, moved out of state in Jessica's, classic pattern of abuse victims trying to escape. Can we find them? Kate smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who'd found prey. I already have. Amanda Patterson, and now Amanda Patterson lives in Boulder. Remarried. 2 kids. Jessica Sullivan is in Seattle. Works in HR, single. Will they talk to us? Only one way to find out. 2 days later, Ethan and Kate stood on Amanda's doorstep in a quiet Boulder suburb. Nice house, kids' bikes in the yard, the life of someone who'd moved on, or tried to. Amanda answered the door, saw Ethan's face and went pale. I don't know you. My name is Ethan Cross. This is Kate Morrison. We're investigating Marcus Reed. I can't talk about him. I signed papers. He tried to kill someone, Ethan said bluntly. His current wife. She's 7 months pregnant. He pushed her off a 5th-floor balcony. She survived. Barely. But he's claiming it was an accident. And he's going to walk away unless we can prove he's done this before. Amanda's hand tightened on the doorframe. I can't. The NDA. If I violate it, they'll sue me. I'll lose everything. My husband doesn't even know about Marcus. About that part of my life. Did he hurt you? Kate asked gently. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Please leave. I fell downstairs, Amanda said, her voice breaking. That's what the police report says. I was 5 months pregnant. I lost the baby. And Barbara Reed paid me $200,000 to call it an accident. To sign papers saying I'd never talk about Marcus. To disappear. The words hung in the air. Confirmation of what Ethan had suspected. Marcus Reed had done this before. He'd hurt pregnant women before. And his mother had covered it up. Will you testify? Ethan asked. Will you help us stop him? I can't. Amanda wiped her eyes. The NDA. I have kids now. A husband, a life. If I violate that agreement, they'll take everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I can't. She closed the door. Kate and Ethan sat in the car outside Amanda's house. She's scared, Kate said, and I don't blame her. The Reed family is powerful. They've made her sign away her truth. Jessica Sullivan is our last shot. They flew to Seattle that night, found Jessica at a coffee shop near her office. Mid-30s, professional, put together. But when they showed her Marcus's photo, her hands started shaking. I haven't seen that face in 5 years, Jessica said. Haven't thought about him in years, and I'd like to keep it that way. He's done it again, Ethan said. Another wife, another pregnant woman, another fall. Jessica went still. She survived? Yes, but he's claiming it was an accident, just like with you. How did you know about me? Public records, sealed divorce, NDA, large settlement. We put the pieces together. Jessica pulled up her sleeve. A scar ran from her wrist to her elbow, white and faded but still visible. Glass coffee table. He threw me through it during an argument. 26 stitches. I was 6 weeks pregnant. The trauma caused a miscarriage. Jesus, Ethan breathed. His lawyer said if I pressed charges, they'd ruin me. They had photos of me at bars. From before I knew Marcus. Made it look like I was an alcoholic. Said they'd drag me through the media. Destroy my career. I was terrified. So I took the money, signed the papers, moved across the country. Will you testify? Jessica laughed bitterly. And violate the NDA? They'd sue me for millions. I'd lose my job, my apartment, everything I've built in 5 years. I'm sorry, but I survived by leaving. That's all I can do. Back in Denver, Ethan sat in his penthouse feeling hopeless. We have 2 previous wives who confirm Marcus is a pattern abuser, who confirm he hurt them while they were pregnant, and we can't use any of it. Kate poured them both a drink. NDAs are powerful legal tools, but they're not unbreakable. If we can prove Marcus committed crimes, the NDAs might be invalidated. Criminal activity voids confidentiality agreements. But we need evidence of crimes, and all the evidence is locked behind those very NDAs. So we find different evidence. Claire said Marcus was having an affair with someone named S. Bradford. Let's find her. Get her to talk. Why would his mistress help us? Because mistresses are almost always the next victims. If we can make her see that, she might flip. Finding Sienna Bradford took less than a day. Interior designer, 28 years old, portfolio full of high-end homes, and according to Kate's surveillance, still seeing Marcus, despite the arrest, despite everything. She's meeting him tomorrow night, Kate said. He's on house arrest, but he's violating it, sneaking out to see her. I have photos, but photos of an affair don't prove attempted murder. No, Ethan agreed, but they might motivate Sienna to tell the truth, if she knows what Marcus is capable of. You want to talk to her? I want Claire to talk to her. Woman to woman, survivor to potential victim. Kate nodded slowly. It's risky. If this backfires, it could hurt Claire's case. And if we do nothing, Marcus walks, takes Sophia, and eventually he kills someone. Maybe Sienna, maybe the next woman. We have to try. But first, they had to convince Claire. And Claire was in the hospital, barely holding on, fighting for 2 hours a day with her daughter and wondering if she'd ever truly be free. 6 weeks after the fall, Sophia came home from the NICU, not to Claire's arms, to Marcus Reed's apartment, the apartment he'd moved into during house arrest, the apartment where Claire's daughter would live without her. Claire had been discharged from the hospital the week before. She could walk now with a cane. Physical therapy was helping. Her pelvis was healing. But the pain was constant, a reminder every time she moved of what Marcus had done. Ethan had offered her his guest room. She'd refused at first. Pride, independence, not wanting to be a burden, but she had nowhere else to go. No money, no apartment. Marcus had locked her out of their penthouse, frozen their joint accounts, left her with nothing. So she'd moved into Ethan's penthouse. Separate rooms, separate lives. But he was there, making sure she ate, driving her to physical therapy, sitting with her during the 2-hour supervised visits with Sophia. The visits were torture. 2 hours in a supervised room at the hospital, a social worker watching everything, taking notes, judging whether Claire was stable enough, fit enough, sane enough to be a mother, and then time would be up. They'd take Sophia, hand her back to Marcus, and Claire would watch her daughter disappear into the arms of the man who'd tried to kill her. But today was different. Today, Sophia was being released, and Claire had convinced the social worker to let her be present for the discharge. She'd be there, even if it was just to say goodbye. Marcus arrived at the NICU at 3 p.m. With him was Barbara, dressed perfectly as always, and Sienna Bradford. Claire stared at the woman she'd only seen in photos. Young, beautiful, confident, everything Claire used to be before Marcus broke her. "Who's this?" the social worker asked. "Sienna is my interior designer," Marcus said smoothly. "She's been helping set up the nursery for Sophia, making sure everything's ready." The social worker made a note, didn't question it further. Claire watched Sienna hold her daughter, watched her coo and smile and play pretend mother, and something inside Claire broke, or maybe unbreaken, because she saw it in Sienna's eyes. The same thing Claire had felt 8 years ago when she first met Marcus. The belief that she was special, that he loved her, that she was different from whoever came before. Sienna had no idea she was already on the clock, already counting down to the moment when Marcus would decide she was inconvenient, when the mask would slip, when love would become control, would become violence. After they left with Sophia, Claire sat in the empty NICU room and cried. Ethan found her there an hour later. "They took her," she said, and Sienna was there, playing house with my daughter, and Marcus was smiling like he'd won. He hasn't won. The criminal trial is in 3 months. We're still building the case. With what evidence? Amanda and Jessica won't testify. The laptop's gone, my phone's gone. It's my word against his. And everyone thinks I'm crazy. Ethan knelt beside her chair. Kate wants to make contact with Sienna. Show her who Marcus really is. See if she'll help us. Why would she help us? She's sleeping with him. She's probably in love with him. Because you can warn her. You can tell her what's coming. Give her a chance to get out before it's too late. Claire laughed bitterly. I tried to warn myself. It didn't work. Why would she listen? Because you're living proof of what Marcus is capable of. Because seeing you might save her life. Claire thought about it. Thought about Sienna's face in the NICU, young and confident and blind, just like Claire had been. Okay, she said finally. Set up a meeting. Let's see if we can save her from making my mistakes. 3 days later, Claire sat in a coffee shop in Cherry Creek. She'd left her cane at home, wanted to look strong, capable, not like the broken woman she felt like inside. Sienna arrived exactly on time, saw Claire, hesitated, but curiosity or courage or something made her sit down. I don't know what you want, Sienna said, but I'm only here because I'm curious. I want to show you something. Claire pulled out her phone, pulled up photos, medical records, x-rays of her shattered pelvis, photos of bruises from years ago that she documented secretly, the text messages between her and Marcus, the ones where he called her worthless, stupid, crazy. Marcus did this to you? Sienna's voice was quiet. Over 5 years, it started small, a grab during an argument, a push, then escalated. By the end, I was covering bruises with makeup every day, telling myself it would get better, that he loved me, that I was overreacting. He said you jumped, that you were depressed. I didn't jump. He pushed me because I found out about you. Sienna flinched. He said you knew, that you'd given up on the marriage, that you wanted a divorce anyway. Did he tell you about Amanda, his first wife? He said they were young, that it didn't work out. She fell downstairs while pregnant, lost the baby. His mother paid her $200,000 to stay quiet. Claire leaned forward. Did he tell you about Jessica, his second wife? I don't. Through a glass table, 26 stitches, miscarried at 6 weeks, another settlement, another NDA. Claire showed her the documentation Kate had compiled, the divorce records, the sealed files, the pattern. 3 wives, Claire said. 3 accidents while pregnant, 3 babies lost or nearly lost. You see the pattern, right? Sienna's hands were shaking. Why are you telling me this? Because you're next. You're already in his life. His mother knows you. You're at family events. How long before you get pregnant? How long before you become inconvenient? How long before you fall too? He loves me. He loved me too. Until he didn't. Until I became a problem. Until he decided murder was easier than divorce. Sienna stood up. I don't believe you. You're desperate. You want to destroy him because he's moving on. This is jealousy. Look at me. Claire stood too, ignoring the pain shooting through her pelvis. Really look at me. I'm 32 years old. I can barely walk. My daughter is being raised by the man who tried to kill her in the womb. I have nothing, no home, no money, no life. Why would I make this up? Because you're crazy. Everyone says so. Everyone says what Barbara Reed and her expensive PR team want them to say. Claire pulled up her shirt slightly, showed the scars from her surgeries, the hardware holding her pelvis together. Does this look like a suicide attempt? Or does it look like someone tried to murder me and I survived? Sienna stared at the scars. Something shifted in her eyes. Doubt, fear, recognition. Has he grabbed you yet? Claire asked softly. During an argument? Just his hand on your arm, a little too tight. But then he apologized. Said the trial stress made him crazy. Said he'd never do it again. Sienna's silence was answer enough. He will do it again, Claire said. And next time it'll be harder. And the time after that, harder still. Until one day you'll be where I am. Or worse. Dead. Sienna grabbed her purse. I need to go. Please, please help me. Testify about the affair. About his lies. About anything. Help me save my daughter. I can't. Sienna's voice broke. I'm sorry, but I can't. She left. Claire sat back down, deflated. It hadn't worked. Sienna was too deep in Marcus's spell, too convinced she was special, just like Claire had been. Kate slid into the seat across from her. She'd been watching from across the cafe. That could have gone better. She doesn't believe me. But she's thinking about it. I saw her face. You planted a seed of doubt. A seed isn't enough. We need evidence, testimony, something concrete. Kate's phone buzzed. She checked it. Her expression changed. Sienna just drove to Marcus's apartment. Of course she did, to tell him about our conversation. Maybe, or maybe to ask questions. Either way, I have surveillance on his place. Let's see what happens. What happened was something they couldn't have predicted. Kate's tech specialist had tapped the phones around Marcus's apartment building. Not admissible in court, definitely illegal, but potentially useful. And they caught a phone call, Sienna to Marcus, 2 hours after the coffee shop meeting. She came to me, Sienna said. Claire, she told me about Amanda and Jessica, about the pattern, about that bitch. Marcus's voice was cold, calculated. She's more resourceful than I thought. Marcus, she had photos, medical records. She knew everything. None of that matters. They can't prove anything. Did you hurt them? Amanda and Jessica? Did you hurt Claire? Does it matter? They took the money and shut up. Just like Claire will eventually. She can't win this fight. What if the jury believes her? They won't. I'm walking out of that courtroom a free man. And then Claire is going to have a little accident, another mental health crisis, tragic suicide. I'll get full custody, the life insurance money, and we'll finally be together. Jesus Christ, Marcus. I've done it before. I'll do it again. No one can stop me. My mother has half the Denver PD on payroll. We're untouchable. Then the call ended. Kate and Ethan listened to the recording, looked at each other. We have him, Ethan said. Full confession. He admitted to hurting Amanda and Jessica, to planning to kill Claire. Everything. We obtained it illegally, Kate said quietly. Wiretapping without a warrant. This recording is inadmissible in court. What? If we turn this in, the case gets thrown out. Fruit of the poisonous tree, Marcus walks forever. Double jeopardy means he can never be tried again. Ethan stared at her. So we have proof he's guilty, but we can't use it. Not in criminal court. And what good is it? It's proof for Sienna. Proof that we're telling the truth. She needs to hear this. And if she agrees to testify voluntarily about the affair, about his lies, that's admissible. That's evidence we can use. She just left that coffee shop convinced we're lying. Why would she believe a recording? Because she heard the call. She knows what he said. If we play this for her, she'll know we're not making it up. And if she doesn't believe it's real, if she thinks we faked it, Kate didn't have an answer for that. Claire came out of the bathroom where she'd been washing her face. What's happening? Ethan played her the recording, watched her face as Marcus's words sank in. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Another mental health crisis. Tragic suicide. We're untouchable. By the end, Claire was crying, not from sadness, from rage. He's planning to kill me, she said. Even now, even after everything, he's planning to finish what he started. We're not going to let that happen, Ethan said. How can you stop him? You have proof and you can't even use it. We find another way. We always find another way. But privately, Ethan wasn't sure there was another way. They were running out of time, running out of options. And Marcus Reed was winning. 48 hours before the trial was set to begin, Claire sat in Ethan's living room staring at nothing. The past 3 months had been a blur of preparation, meeting with prosecutors, going over her testimony. Preocuparon ko lamang na guys. Preparing for cross-examination. But without hard evidence, without witnesses, the case was weak. And they all knew it. The criminal trial for attempted murder, the custody battle for Sophia, the defamation lawsuit, all of it happening simultaneously. All of it designed to crush Claire into silence, into submission, into recanting everything. Sometimes she wondered if it would be easier to just lie. Say she jumped. Say Marcus was innocent. Get her daughter back. Get her life back. But then she'd remember his hands on her chest. The push, the fall, the months of abuse leading up to that moment. And she knew she couldn't lie. Not about this. Not anymore. A knock at the door. Ethan answered it, and Sienna Bradford walked in. Claire stood up. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Sienna looked terrible. Makeup smeared, hair messy, like she'd been crying for hours. After our conversation, after what you told me, I went home, and I thought about what you said. And? And 2 weeks ago, Marcus grabbed me. During an argument about the trial, he was stressed, angry. He put his hands around my throat and squeezed, just for a second, then let go, apologized, said he'd never do it again. Sienna pulled down her turtleneck. Fading bruises marked her neck. Fingerprints, clear as day. He said the trial stress was making him crazy. Sienna continued, that once it was over, things would be different. But after talking to you, I realized things won't be different. He'll just find a new reason to be angry, a new excuse. What changed your mind? Claire asked. Why now? I listened to myself on that phone call with him, the one your investigator recorded. I heard what he said about eliminating problems, about the insurance money, about you being next. Sienna sat down heavily. I realized I'm not special. I'm not different from you or Amanda or Jessica. I'm just the next victim who hasn't fallen yet. Will you testify? Ethan asked. To what? He never told me he pushed you. I can't testify to something I don't know. But you can testify about the affair, Kate said, about his lies, about him sneaking out during house arrest to see you, about the fact that he told everyone Claire was delusional while he was actively cheating on her. His lawyer will destroy me. Probably, Claire said. Your career will be damaged. Your reputation. Your family might disown you. It's going to be ugly. Then why would I do it? Because I can't watch him win. Can't watch him take my daughter. Can't watch him get away with trying to kill me. And eventually, Sienna, he'll hurt you too. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. And I can't carry that weight. Knowing I could have warned you and didn't. Knowing you could have helped stop him and didn't. Sienna was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Okay, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth. About the affair. About the laws, Bazway. About everything, say. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in March, 6 months after Christmas, 6 months after the fall. The courtroom was packed. Media, spectators, people who'd followed the case online and wanted to see the drama in person. Claire wore a navy suit Ethan had bought her. She'd regained some weight. Physical therapy had helped her walk without a cane. But she still hurt, still had nightmares, still jumped at sudden movements, still carried the scars of what Marcus had done. Marcus sat at the defense table looking perfect. Expensive suit, sympathetic expression, every inch the wrongly accused husband. Barbara sat behind him, elegant and composed, playing the supportive mother for the cameras. The prosecutor, Daniel Torres, was good. Claire had met with him dozens of times. He believed her, believed in her case, but even he admitted the evidence was circumstantial. We have your testimony, Torres had said during their last meeting. We have Sienna's affair testimony. We have Ethan's witness statement. We have the medical evidence showing injuries consistent with a push. But we don't have video. We don't have the laptop evidence. We don't have previous wives willing to testify. It's going to be close. The defense attorney, Richard Westbrook, was better. He was expensive, connected. He'd won cases that should have been unwinnable, and he'd already started his attacks. The prosecution's case, Westbrook said in his opening statement, relies on the testimony of a mentally unstable woman with documented depression and anxiety, a woman who sent text messages saying she wanted to jump, a woman whose ex-boyfriend conveniently happened to be parked outside her building on Christmas morning after 8 years of no contact. This isn't a case about domestic violence. This is a case about mental illness, regret, and false accusations designed to destroy a good man's life. Claire testified on day 2. Torres walked her through 5 years of abuse. Every incident, every bruise, every threatening text message they'd recovered from old backup accounts. The secret bank account she'd been building. The hotel charges. The confrontation on Christmas morning. He pushed me, Claire said clearly, both hands on my chest, hard. I tried to grab his shirt, but he pushed harder, and I fell backward over the railing. Then came cross-examination. Westbrook was surgical, precise. designed to cut without seeming cruel. Mrs. Reed, you were taking antidepressants, correct? Yes, for anxiety. And you'd had thoughts of self-harm during your pregnancy? I was depressed, not suicidal. But you wrote, and I quote, everyone would be better off without me. Is that correct? That was taken out of context at times. Yes or no, Mrs. Reed? Did you write those words? Yes. And you wrote, some days I just want to jump. Correct? Yes, but I didn't mean, thank you, that's all. Ethan testified on day 3. He described seeing Claire fall, the landing, the blood. But under cross-examination, Westbrook got what he needed. Mr. Cross, you were inside your car, correct? Yes. Looking through your windshield? Yes. From approximately 200 feet away? Yes. And you saw Mrs. Reed falling, but you did not see my client push her, did you? I saw her come off that balcony. That wasn't my question. Did you see Marcus Reed's hands on Mrs. Reed? Did you see the moment of contact? No, but thank you. No further questions. Barbara Reed testified for the defense. She stuck to her story. She'd been in the kitchen, heard Claire scream, ran to find her gone. Marcus had been devastated. It was a tragic accident. My daughter-in-law is troubled, Barbara said, playing to the jury perfectly. We love her. We want her to get help. But accusing my son of this terrible crime? It's heartbreaking. It's false, and it's destroying our family. Then came day 4. And Sienna Bradford took the stand. The courtroom buzzed. This was the witness everyone had been waiting for. The mistress, the other woman, the one who could confirm Marcus Reed was a liar. What is your relationship with the defendant? Torres asked. Sienna took a breath. We've been having an affair for 18 months, since before Claire got pregnant. The courtroom erupted. Barbara Reed made a sound like she'd been punched. Marcus's face went carefully blank, but Claire saw the rage in his eyes. Torres continued, were you with Mr. Reed on Christmas Eve? Yes, he left my hotel room at 8:15 on Christmas morning. What did he say he was going to do? He said he was going home to handle the Claire situation. What did you understand that to mean? I asked him. He said she'd found out about us. He needed to take care of it. Take care of how? He didn't specify, but he was angry, more angry than I'd ever seen him. Westbrook's cross-examination was brutal. He painted Sienna as a homewrecker, a liar, a woman desperate for money and attention. But she held firm, admitted to the affair, admitted to being at Marcus's apartment when she shouldn't have been, admitted to everything. You're the reason this family is destroyed, Westbrook said. No, Sienna replied. Marcus Reed is the reason this family is destroyed. I just finally had the courage to tell the truth. The forensic expert testified on day 5. Blood spatter patterns, impact angles, physics. All of it pointed to Claire being pushed, not jumping. If the victim had jumped, the expert explained, she would have landed face first or feet first. The trajectory would be different, but she landed on her back, flat, like she'd been propelled backward. That's consistent with being pushed. Day 6 brought closing arguments. Torres made his case. Pattern of control, financial abuse, isolation, escalation, affair, confrontation, murder attempt. Marcus Reed is a man who thinks he can get away with anything, who thinks money and lawyers and his mother's connections can cover any crime. Don't prove him right. Find him guilty. Westbrook made his. Mentally ill woman, coincidental ex-boyfriend, scorned mistress with an axe to grind, tragic accident. Claire Reed jumped, and rather than admit she has a problem, she's destroying an innocent man. Don't let false accusations ruin a life. Find him not guilty. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Claire sat in the hallway with Ethan, holding his hand, barely breathing. Everything came down to this: 12 strangers deciding whether to believe her, whether Marcus would face consequences, whether Sophia would be safe. The text came at 5:30 p.m. Verdict reached. They filed back into the courtroom. Claire's hands were shaking. Marcus looked confident. Barbara dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Marcus Reed, on the charge of attempted first-degree murder, how do you find? Claire's heart stopped. The world narrowed to a single point. This moment, this answer. Everything. We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded. Barbara screamed. Marcus jumped up, yelling about appeals and lies and injustice. Reporters rushed for doors, and Claire collapsed against Ethan, sobbing. Guilty. They'd believed her. Justice was real. She'd won. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing arrived. Claire had prepared a victim impact statement. So had Amanda Patterson and Jessica Sullivan. Both women had decided to violate their NDAs, to tell their stories, to help make sure Marcus Reed never hurt anyone again. The courtroom was quieter this time, less media. The story was largely over. Guilty verdict delivered. Now just the formality of punishment. Judge Catherine Morrison, the same judge who'd presided over the bail hearing and later the trial, looked tired. This case had taken a toll on everyone involved. Before I deliver sentence, Judge Morrison said, the court will hear victim impact statements. Mrs. Reed, would you like to speak? Claire stood, walked to the podium. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. For 5 years, I thought I was going insane. My husband told me I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, that I was lucky he put up with me. I believed him. I believed I was worthless, crazy, lucky to have him. When I got pregnant, I thought maybe he'd change. Maybe fatherhood would soften him. Instead, he tried to kill me, kill our daughter, because we'd become inconvenient, because divorce was expensive, because murder was easier. You almost succeeded, Marcus. You broke my pelvis, my spine. You took months of my life, months I'll never get back, months I should have spent bonding with my daughter. Instead, I spent them in hospitals and courtrooms, fighting for people to believe me. But I survived. We survived. And I found my voice, the voice you tried to silence, the voice you tried to erase. I'm not asking you to show mercy, Your Honor. I'm asking you to protect the next woman, because there will be a next woman. Men like Marcus Reed don't change. They don't learn. They just find new victims. Send a message that violence against women has consequences, that money and power don't place anyone above the law, that attempted murder is attempted murder, no matter how good your lawyer is. Claire sat down. Amanda Patterson stood next. I lost my baby. I blamed myself for 10 years. Thought I was clumsy, careless, that it was my fault. But Marcus Reed pushed me down those stairs, and his mother paid me to stay quiet, to lie, to let him get away with it. I took the money because I was scared, because I was broken, because I thought no one would believe me. But I'm done being silent. I'm done letting money buy truth. No amount of money is worth watching him do this again. Jessica Sullivan was last. I survived. Barely. I ran, changed my life, tried to forget Marcus Reed existed. But he's always been there, in my nightmares, in my scars, in the baby I lost. Seeing Claire fight when I couldn't, that changed something in me. Made me realize that staying silent doesn't keep you safe. It just lets him hurt someone else. I owe Claire my truth. She deserves witnesses. She deserves people willing to stand up and say, yes, this man is capable of terrible things. Yes, he's done this before. Yes, he'll do it again if you let him. When they finished, Judge Morrison looked at Marcus. Mr. Reed, do you have anything to say before I deliver sentence? Marcus stood. For a moment, Claire thought he might apologize, might show some remorse, but then he spoke. This is a miscarriage of justice. I'm innocent. These women are liars, and I will appeal this verdict until I'm vindicated. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. I've been on the bench for 32 years. I've seen a lot of defendants, a lot of crimes, a lot of excuses, but rarely have I seen such calculated cruelty as I've seen in this case. You didn't kill Claire Reed in a moment of passion or rage. You planned it, researched it, set her up for months, planted evidence suggesting suicide, made her doubt her own sanity, and when the moment came, you pushed your pregnant wife off a 5-story balcony and hoped she'd die. You failed, she survived, and now you face the consequences. The court sentences you to 45 years to life in the Colorado State Penitentiary. With credit for time served, You'll be eligible for parole in the year 2067. You'll be 80 years old. Your daughter will be 45. Perhaps by then you'll understand what you've done. Perhaps by then you'll feel some remorse, but I doubt it. Men like you rarely do. Additionally, your parental rights are hereby terminated. Sophia Reed will be raised by her mother, free from your influence. You will have no contact with her, ever. Your mother, Barbara Reed, is under investigation for witness tampering, bribery, and obstruction of justice. She'll face her own trial. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Marcus was led away in handcuffs, still protesting, still claiming innocence. Barbara collapsed in the gallery, wailing about her son, her family, her ruined life. Claire sat very still. It was over. Really over. Marcus would spend the rest of his life in prison. Sophia was safe. She was safe. They'd won. 5 years after the fall, Claire Martinez stood in a park in Denver watching her daughter play. Sophia was 5 years old now, healthy, brilliant, full of light. She had no memory of the NICU, no memory of the first terrifying months of her life, just a childhood full of love and safety and freedom. "Higher, Mommy, push me higher," Sophia called from the swing. Claire walked over, only the slightest limp remaining from her injuries. 5 years of physical therapy, 3 surgeries to remove the hardware from her pelvis. But she could walk, run, play with her daughter, live a normal life. "Hold on tight," Claire said, giving the swing a push. Ethan arrived with coffee. 6 months ago, they'd gotten married. A small ceremony, just close friends, no press, no drama, just 2 people who'd loved each other, lost each other, and found each other again. It had taken time. Claire had needed years of therapy to work through the trauma, to trust again, to be ready for a relationship. Ethan had waited, patiently, never pushing, just there, supporting, loving without demanding. And eventually, Claire had been ready, ready to try again, ready to trust, ready to love. Ethan had legally adopted Sophia. Marcus's parental rights had been terminated. He was just a biological fact now, a story Claire would tell her daughter when she was old enough, but not her father. Never her father. "How was the conference?" Ethan asked, handing Claire her coffee. "Good, really good. We raised $500,000 for the shelter. Second Chance House, Claire's nonprofit, a shelter for domestic violence survivors, a place that provided housing, legal aid, therapy, job training, everything a woman needed to escape and rebuild. Claire ran it, used her story to help others, to show them that survival was possible, that life after abuse existed. She'd also published a memoir, 5 stories down, 1 life up. It had been on the bestseller list for 26 weeks. The speaking engagements that followed had made her financially independent, given her a platform, a voice. She testified before Congress, pushed for better domestic violence laws, stricter enforcement of protective orders, more funding for shelters and support services. And slowly things were changing. Amanda and Jessica had become friends, supporters of the shelter. They spoke at events sometimes. 3 women who'd survived Marcus Reed, 3 women who refused to stay silent anymore. Sienna had rebuilt her life, lost clients initially, faced backlash, but she'd stuck with it, started over. Now she worked for a nonprofit too, helping other women spot the warning signs of abuse before it was too late. Barbara Reed had been convicted of obstruction of justice and witness tampering, 3 years in prison. Upon release, she'd become a recluse. The Reed family empire had crumbled. The money didn't buy happiness, didn't buy truth, didn't buy freedom. Marcus was still in prison. He'd appealed, lost, appealed again, lost again. In 2067, when he was 80 years old, he could apply for parole. But even then, Claire would be there, testifying, making sure he stayed exactly where he belonged. "Mommy," Sophia ran over, "can we get ice cream?" "After dinner." "Oh, but I'm hungry now," Claire laughed. The sound came easily now, naturally. For so long after the fall, she'd forgotten how to laugh, how to feel joy, how to exist without fear. But she'd rebuilt, piece by piece, day by day, with help from Ethan, from therapy, from other survivors who understood. And now she was here, happy, genuinely happy, not just surviving, but thriving. Dinner first, Claire said firmly, then ice cream. Sophia pouted but accepted it. She was a good kid, strong, independent, fierce, just like her mother. As they walked toward the car, Ethan took Claire's hand. You okay? Yeah, I really am. And she meant it. The nightmares had faded. The fear had lessened. The scars remained, physical and emotional, but they didn't define her anymore. They were just part of her story, proof of survival, evidence of strength. People often ask Claire if she forgave Marcus. The question always made her uncomfortable, because forgiveness implied he deserved it. Implied she owed him a peace. She didn't forgive him. She'd let go of the hatred because carrying it hurt her more than him. But forgiveness? No. Some things were unforgivable. What she had instead was perspective. Understanding that the abuse wasn't her fault, that she'd survived something terrible, that she'd fought back, that she'd won. That night after Sophia was asleep, Claire stood in her bedroom looking at old photos. There was one from 8 years ago, her and Ethan, young and happy, before everything went wrong, before she had left him for Marcus, before the abuse, before the fall. Regrets? Ethan asked, coming up behind her. Some. I wish I'd never left you. Wish I'd never met Marcus. Wish I'd seen the signs earlier. But if you hadn't lived through it, you wouldn't be who you are now. You wouldn't have second chance house. Wouldn't be saving other women. That's a hell of a silver lining. It is, but it's real. You took something horrible and made it meaningful. That's not nothing. Claire turned to face him. You know what I think about sometimes? That morning. Christmas. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't had that stupid gift, if you'd driven away 5 minutes earlier. But I didn't. I know. And I don't believe in fate or divine intervention or any of that. But sometimes I wonder, what if the universe was just tired of watching Marcus Reed get away with it? What if everything aligned just perfectly to stop him? Or, Ethan said, pulling her close, maybe it was just a coincidence that saved your life. And then you did the rest. You fought. You testified. You refused to stay silent. That wasn't fate. That was you. Claire thought about that. Thought about the choice she'd made in the hospital to tell the truth. The choice to testify despite the attacks on her character. The choice to keep fighting when giving up would have been easier. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe she'd saved herself. I fell 5 stories, Claire said quietly, onto the car of the man I'd left 8 years before. Some people call it fate, coincidence, a miracle. I call it a second chance, and I've spent every day since earning it. She meant that, every word. The fall had broken her body. The trial had tested her spirit. The recovery had taken years, but she'd made it through. And on the other side was a life she'd built herself, a life free from fear, free from violence, free from Marcus Reed. That night, Claire dreamed, but not about falling, not about Marcus or Christmas lights or blood on shattered glass. She dreamed about Sophia's laugh, about the shelter opening its doors to another survivor, about testifying before Congress and seeing real change happen. She dreamed about the future, not the past. And when she woke up in the morning, Sophia was climbing into bed between her and Ethan, giggling and demanding breakfast. Pancakes, Sophia declared. Pancakes it is, Claire agreed. Just another normal morning. Another normal day. The kind of ordinary miracle she'd fought so hard to have. As they made breakfast together, Sophia chattering about kindergarten, and Ethan burning the first pancake like always, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain. She still carried scars. Still had hard days. Still sometimes woke up at night remembering, but peace anyway. The peace of knowing she'd survived. That her daughter was safe. That justice had been served. That she'd found her voice and used it to help others. The peace of knowing that falling 5 stories hadn't killed her. It had freed her. And that freedom, that was everything.